Savannah Guthrie's mother, abruptly vanished in Arizona at the start of 2026. Music. She departed willingly with no sign or message. Music, like a murder scene, the house was cordoned off. For the first time, the woman who questioned America's most influential people every morning had no answers for herself. She wasn't at the desk for that day's show, and that quiet reverberated more loudly than any interview that had helped establish Savannah Guthrie's reputation. Savannah Guthrie's talent was developed via strict discipline. An anchor who is a journalist and a lawyer is uncommon. The one who, with cold precision, sets the pace for mornings in America. She gained trust by addressing questions honestly and directly, and by never giving in, rather than by being instantly liable. Internal doubts when she entered the AM time slot are the difficult road behind that calm demeanor. In times of public discord and the cost of music, prioritizing standards over crowd satisfaction, political pressure is pressing in. Tragic music then knocked. Every difference in Savannah Guthrie's life comes to light when the presenter is the focus of the news. Public authority is confronted with private powerlessness, unscripted agony colliding with professional discipline. She was able to weather national storms thanks to her talent, music. She is forced to pause before the most intimate inquiry of all because of this turmoil. After a startling incident, the narrative embarks on a quest to uncover the person behind a voice that previously appeared to be unshakable. In music. Savannah Guthrie was in New York at the end of January 2026 when a series of strange signals started coming from Arizona. It had hardly ever happened before, but on Sunday morning, her peaceful 84-year-old mother, Nancy Guthrie, did not show up to church. For people who knew Nancy, this was neither a postponement nor a change in schedule. It was not there. The family headed straight to the Catalina Foothills home. Inside was nobody inside, but the door had no indications of forced entry or disturbance. The telephone was still inside. There was no damage to the wallet. No one had stolen the keys. What was most concerning was that she had not changed a single one of her everyday prescriptions. That sequence of events did not raise the idea that she, music, had left alone, especially for an elderly woman with limited mobility. It shut it. Around noon, someone called 911. Additionally, the case file was initially launched as a report on a missing individual, but the music direction swiftly changed. Investigators observed that there was no indication music of preparation. The disappearance did not fit her regular routine, and it did not correspond with her physical state. As a scene, the house was sealed. Procedures for forensics were started. The Federal Bureau of Investigation helped, and then the Puma County Homicide Team took over. Music. Drone and tracking dog searches were conducted, then paused to allow for a thorough examination of every little detail within the music living area. The commonplace items that were before invisible are now possible hints. Music. In succinct remarks, officials highlighted important components. She had limited mobility. No necessary medication was taken, and there was no sign that she had departed voluntarily. With every new piece of information, the range of possible explanations was reduced, and the case was elevated above the safe realm of a typical disappearance. At the same time, Savannah Guthrie left the Today Show without giving a long explanation or doing any interviews. She selected a written statement, music, that was read by a coworker, a request for community assistance, a thank you note from law enforcement, and music, a single brief sentence repeated throughout headlines. Take her home. The way she has phrased inquiries throughout her career, there are no music, exclamations, or descriptions of pain, just a straightforward command. The roles, music, switched places after that. The music topic of the news was the morning program anchor who usually sits behind the news desk, and every action, leaving the studio, traveling to Arizona, delaying planned events, took place in silence, while nevertheless carrying the weight of a significant turning point in the music industry. Personal helplessness and professional discipline clashed there. The fragility, music, of the one waiting was juxtaposed with the authority of the one asking the question. On the surface, everything appeared to stop at a current crisis, the moment Savannah Guthrie left the studio. She did not, however, perceive her mother's disappearance as arising out of nothing. It touched a chord that had been tense for a long time, one that dated back to her early years, when music, loss, and responsibility initially influenced her worldview. On December 27, 1971, Savannah Guthrie was born in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, into an American family that lived and worked overseas. Charles Edward Guthrie, her father, worked as a mining engineer. Her mom, Nancy Guthrie, music, decided to be a stay-at-home mom and avoid the spotlight at all costs. Savannah's early years were spent apart from a permanent home. She had to constantly adapt after leaving Australia at an early age to relocate music to the United States. Not spectacular, but sufficient to teach a child that things are never stable. 3 children were born to the Guthrie family. Savannah was not a child by herself. Music, but from a young age, she was accustomed to maintaining her position in silence, music, and without vying for attention. Her siblings were not exposed to the media, music, and virtually nothing about their life is available to the public now. That privacy wasn't a coincidence. It demonstrated a dependable family decision. Private matters are kept hidden from the public. At the age of 16, Savannah experienced the biggest upheaval, music. Her father had a heart attack and passed away unexpectedly. No planning was done, and there was no time to adapt, music. She did not rebel or have emotional outbursts as a result of the loss. It, music, elicited a distinct reaction, withdrawing within and preserving order. After that, Savannah discovered how to control her emotions and avoid making her suffering visible to others. Savannah and her mother's relationship quietly grew closer when her father passed away. Not reliance, but a distinct music collaboration between 2 ladies who must maintain their resolve. Rather than being a well-known person, her mother was a persistent, unsung presence, music, in the everyday rhythms of existence that didn't need to be named. Savannah developed a lifelong music attitude that discipline, education, and the capacity to influence events are more important sources of security than consoling words. Savannah's path began with a series of slow, significant decisions, rather than with dramatic breakthroughs from that family base. She initially pursued journalism because it gave her a sense of control rather than because she wanted to be a famous person. Every detail must stand up to inspection. Facts must be confirmed, and music inquiries must be taken seriously. She received her journalism degree from the University of Arizona during a period when speed, emotion, and performance were becoming more and more important in American media. She rejected quick cuts, wrote meticulously, and spoke sparingly, giving the impression that she was out of step, music, with that fad. Savannah did the exact opposite of what was anticipated when on-air opportunities started to arise. She chose to study law at Georgetown University rather than continue riding the momentum. This choice was viewed in the media as a perplexing move. Music, backward. Some believed she was burdening herself needlessly. Some questioned if someone so scholarly could ever really connect with a large audience through music. Savannah Guthrie's name was once accompanied by a question mark in business settings. Was she going in the wrong direction? However, law was not a side trip for Savannah. The framework was music. She was under a different kind of pressure during her time at Georgetown. Music, reasoning could not be faulty, arguments could not be sentimental, and every word could be pushed to its music utmost. It was a challenging time. My weariness was caused by maintaining mental acuity in a harsh setting, not by studio schedules or bright lights. Music, Savannah stuck to legislation, case law, music, and the ruthless logic of legal reasoning, while many around her continued to advance in their careers. That decision was long and lonely, but it wasn't noisy. Savannah's grasp of power through its legal system was unique on American television when she returned to journalism. She didn't require many inquiries. Every escape path appeared to have been locked by the time she inquired. Music, no long preparations, no droning, no letting interviewees stray into comfortable terrain. Music, although her style did not immediately win her popularity, it gradually established a subtle respectability that producers, editors, and finally viewers came to appreciate. Rather of following a straight path to stardom, Savannah Guthrie's career developed along a trajectory of trust, which is sluggish, weighty, and extremely challenging to reverse. Savannah Guthrie began her career at the bottom of American television in 1993, shortly after receiving her degree in journalism. Music, no name recognition, no mentor, no lights. She began her career as a field reporter for local music stations, where stories were selected based on necessity rather than appeal. Week-long legal cases, criminal trials, and traffic accidents, tales that left no room for error. Savannah spent nearly all of her time at music, courtrooms, and crime scenes between music 1993 and 1997. The days started with police reports and finished with late-night screenplays. Music that were sufficiently tight to pass muster with a defense lawyer. She picked up a strict craft rule there. A report is not safer because of emotion. The piece became sensitive each time personal feelings were included. She started removing extraneous material, preserving only hard music, facts, and unavoidable inquiries. She began taking on increasingly complicated legal issues. In 1998, once she had gotten used to the harsh rhythm, cases in which a single uncorrected detail may have a significant negative impact on the media. She wasn't a particularly popular reporter. When things got dangerous, she was the one called. Savannah was typically the last person to leave the courtroom during such times. Music, going over documents, timelines, and statements again. She didn't start again when she returned to television in the early 2000s after earning her law degree. She continued to work in local media, but as a legal correspondent. At this point, she gained a reputation as challenging, not because of her demeanor, but rather because she pushed music to revise scripts, remove deceptive lines, or deny airtime if the facts, music, were not reliable. Those who wanted the news to spread more quickly put more pressure on the field than the field itself. Moreover, there were no noteworthy honors or noteworthy occasions. Over the course of more than 10 years, Savannah built up professional credibility, which is imperceptible but crucial in determining who advances. By 2006, her name was starting to come up in national TV recruiting discussions, not because she was dazzling, but rather because she had demonstrated that her music would not disrupt the news's framework. In 2007, after working at the lowest level for over 10 years, she finally entered a career that many people only dream about, becoming a legal analyst and reporter for NBC News. Music, it put her in a position where every mistake may set a dangerous precedent, while also opening up opportunities for the entire country. Music, her work was not dependent on anchor lights from the beginning. She emerged when narratives became intricate. Senate hearings where language were carefully considered, elections mired in legal issues, and music, Supreme Court of the United States rulings that might change the balance of power. Music, Savannah did not narrate by feeling at those crossings. Music, she broke things down, put them on the legal level, and had the audience, music, face the repercussions. There was no smooth transition from local to national. The tempo quickened. The scrutiny of music increased. On some nights, assessments were redone several times merely to eliminate a single phrase that could be misinterpreted. Savannah frequently held back music shows in closed sessions, delaying their airing until the legal framework was in place. She was difficult to work with because of music, but it eventually gave her an unofficial role: the individual who prevents risk before it becomes a crisis. During contentious election cycles and constitutional music discussions, she managed tasks that required complete clarity, her name showing up at the end of clearing lists, when delicate sections required final confirmation, was what initially garnered her recognition rather than prizes. Internally, that reputation spread more quickly than outside. When stories teetered on the brink of safety, NBC turned to Savannah Guthrie as its legal filter. During this time, the emphasis was to not fail rather than to demonstrate talent. Every appearance involved striking a balance between legal accuracy and broadcast speed. Silently, The strain built up. However, it set Savannah on a new course, where legitimacy was determined by whether the show remained viable after it aired, rather than by likability. When Savannah Guthrie was appointed a White House correspondent in 2009, she entered a high-pressure environment where every query had instant political repercussions. Her position at the core of power, where every word, music, might be calculated to distort, reroute, or deflect the truth, was no longer protected by remote legal analysis. It moved at a different tempo. Every mistake might be exaggerated into a perceived music, posture, information flowed quickly, and music, context changed continuously. She was said to be too serious for television, with a stare that hardly ever softened, and music, questions that got right to the heart of things, leaving no opportunity for guests to captivate an audience. Her style remained the same. In order to keep the questions pertinent without disrupting the live flow, she changed the beat. The long days at the White House sharpened a new ability, maintaining composure in the face of public criticism while harboring a constant tension music within due to the prohibition of making mistakes. Her credentials gained enough weight over those 3 years that she was hired for a position in 2012 that few were willing to take. Co-anchor of NBC News's Today Show. The familiar softness of morning television was what one side expected music to be. The other agreed to a more firm and unyielding tone. The focus of comparisons, tempo, music, expression, and question style shifted to Savannah. At once, pressure came from all sides. Then there were heated private talks inside. Every week, ratings were reviewed. It was questioned if she was suitable for the morning slot. Replacement scenarios were once thought of as a short-term solution. NBC took the more difficult route and restructured the show, rather than asking Savannah to change who she was. Savannah was positioned exactly where correctness mattered most, where her strength, music, would no longer be confused with coldness, and the content was more obviously layered, with rhythms redistributed. Today, her first few months were a period of silent perseverance. She didn't ask for patience from the audience, defend herself in public, or describe her music style. She made sure each presentation was strong enough to withstand audience waves by arriving early and thoroughly preparing more. Music fatigue lived in lengthy edit sessions and decisions made under the lights, but it did not manifest on air. One truth had changed before the issue had completely subsided: music. As the program stayed consistent, Savannah's position started to be viewed as a pillar in formation rather than a risk. She did not soften or recede in order to be accepted more quickly after the initial shock. She ventured farther into places that few people lingered in. Her area of expertise was sensitive political and legal subjects, where she asked questions to establish boundaries rather than try to become viral. Her steady pacing, direct music, stare, and framing frequently caused influential people to think twice before entering the set. Although no formal list was made public, music booking calendars showed gaps. Invites went unanswered, and interviews were delayed. Music, everything went nicely on broadcast. Who showed up was subtly filtered by the weight of standards behind it. Savannah was at the center of a time of intense polarization in American media by 2017. Mornings were now interactions with profound societal divisions rather than just brief updates. On music, stories from #Meto are reviving conversations where neutrality was practically impossible, challenging power and revisiting ethics. There was criticism from all quarters. She was referred to as too tough on some days and not tough enough on others. Another fact was exposed by the absurdity of those criticisms. She didn't stick with one side long enough to please music, them. The oversight process became more stringent. Details were examined in further detail. Music, silently, personal pressure built up. But in the midst of the overwhelming music response, one thing never changed. Savannah stayed within the bounds of her vocation. No retraction, no retreat, no discipline. She was put on the front line during a hotly contested music election in 2020 with lengthy broadcasts, music, frequent updates, and questions designed to resist numerous levels of interpretation. She became a stabilizing point, music, so that the system wouldn't sway. And this was no longer a personal test, but rather a system trial. The team's ability to maintain rhythm when even minor alterations could cause a music crisis was linked to the silent recognition that followed. Savannah created a new route beside that tense arena. Quieter but tenacious, she wrote children's novels that soon attracted readers, expanded beyond television, and achieved sales that many professional authors would be envious of. It wasn't a means of avoiding politics, rather, it was a means of establishing a connection with the public, not by debate, but with security and music trust. Savannah Guthrie was no longer the contentious choice music of the day by this point. A silent testament to how firmly the program remained in its music darkest moments. She stood as a pillar, the protector of standards while news pace accelerated. Savannah Guthrie's private life used to develop in a completely different way. Quiet, guarded, and away from the lights, despite an increasingly hectic work schedule and a position that was becoming firm on national television. In 2004, she met media producer and journalist Mark Orchard in a journalistic setting where work frequently overlapped. No eye-catching moment, red carpets, or music, social gatherings were present. Conversations about the job, scheduling, and mutual pressure, a language Savannah felt comfortable and secure using, were the foundation of the relationship. They got married in 2005, just as her career was taking off, but had not yet peaked nationally. There was hardly any media coverage of the straightforward wedding. Their marital life operated similarly, being private, music confined and seldom shown. Long music shifts, sporadic travel, and evenings that belonged more to broadcasting than to family life were all things Savannah continued to engross herself in. That was a beat that Mark Orchard knew, or thought he did. Over time, uneven tempos rather than noisy disagreement were the cause of music distance. The amount of music space for a calm shared life decreased as Savannah took on increasingly challenging tasks. The marriage existed in parallel, under one roof, without children to hold them in the same orbit. Music. Each, however, was drawn deeply into their own worlds. Disagreements did not turn into open disputes. They gathered in stillness, the kind that arises when neither musician is willing to face the music. The marriage ended in 2009 as Savannah embarked on a new chapter in her career as a White House journalist. The music divorce was brief and contained. No arguments, no news releases, no lengthy justifications. Mark Orchard softly left her public life the same way he had entered it. Despite not leaving any public scars, that conclusion confirmed a reality in Savannah's life. Every professional advancement has a price. However, her private life, music, was confined to a zone that needed complete protection as she resisted public criticism and national pressure, not out of concern for public opinion, but rather from the knowledge, music, that some losses are genuine without having to be explained. She largely cut off her romantic life after the amicable divorce. The ensuing years were spent in a busy work orbit with fewer social ties. Music. She met Michael Feldman in such sterile setting in 2013, not at a party or entertainment event, but in a setting influenced by political and intellectual endeavors. Feldman, a political advisor, was accustomed to strategic pressure, the language of authority, and choices that did not allow for emotion. An uncommon point, music, of connection was created by those similarities. Both recognized that time and responsibilities pushed life onward constantly. In contrast to Savannah's public life, the connection, music, grew slowly. No pictures of hands in hand. No tales are told for the sake of popular affection. Meetings were held during infrequent music breaks in schedules when quiet was comfortable rather than uncomfortable. For Savannah, it was the first time in years that she didn't have to justify why job took precedence over music. For Feldman, it was a partnership that did not vie for attention. They were married in a music, quiet, private ceremony in March 2014 that hardly made the news. This marriage was based on an unwritten pact rather than on overt affection. Music. Be mindful of each other's personal space. They both had separate worlds, but were not divorced from one another, and their joint lives followed certain routines. Every morning, Savannah stayed in front of the audience. Music. Feldman supported strategic choices. Not canceling each other out are parallel rhythms. Savannah gave birth to Vale, her first child, just a few months later in August 2014. Being a mother came at a sensitive time in one's profession, requiring quick adjustments in family life. Their son Charlie was born in 2016, ending a time when she worked on national television while reorganizing music, her personal life to meet very different needs. Tensions did not manifest as open conflict. They were engrossed in her well-known discipline, organizing, splitting, and managing. Michael Feldman's marriage is not impervious to pressure. Prolonged political turmoil, Savannah's permanent public presence, and the burden of parenting children under security and privacy monitoring, music, all call for persistent perseverance. Feldman stays out of the spotlight of his wife's career. He remains on the brink. In order to prevent music from becoming an extension of media, I'm keeping the proper distance from the family. This partnership can operate differently from the first because of that decision. Not demanding proof, not noisy, and not competitive. Family life, public storms, and Savannah Guthrie's music, perseverance. This period is no longer a place abandoned, but rather a parallel framework that is silent, protective, and resilient enough to withstand the strain of her profession. Savannah Guthrie's work rhythm did not reduce after her family life was restructured, but it also lost the sense of urgency that came with having to continuously prove her music position. She came across as someone who has persevered long enough to know when to take a stand and when to back off when she was on TV in 2025. She continued to be a key anchor on mornings that featured a lot of legal and political information, as well as on music, days when a single word choice could set off a chain reaction. Music. Her name kept appearing in the time slots, requiring the utmost accuracy, where the program required a stabilizing music point powerful enough to prevent standards from falling, but there was no show of authority. Savannah was no longer a contentious figure or a calculated risk within NBC News's organizational framework. When opposing points of view, music, clashed, she became the one who studied the beat, showing up just in time to wrap up a story, and then leaving without leaving any emotional imprint. Music. Although she appeared on the air less frequently, each appearance had increased significance and was an indication that her stance was no longer up for question. Her children's books remained reissued and music sales remained consistent alongside television. There were no overt marketing initiatives or musical references to her on-air presence. Nevertheless, readership continued to grow in a steady, silent manner. The fact that music existed quietly beside the stressful mornings of national news and formed another branch of her work demonstrated that Savannah's relationship with the audience. Another obvious decision was made that year as well. She made few appearances at music-related events that focused on her own opinions. She avoided being drawn into the position of a divisive figure rather than a conversation facilitator by concentrating on discussions, music, about journalistic standards and the duty of anchors in a divided society. During this time, there were no media crises, disciplinary problems, or indications that the career path she had shaped would be deviated from. Savannah Guthrie was now on broadcast in a very different role than she had in the early years of the scandal. She didn't have to retreat to preserve her reputation or step up her presence to music, assert herself. The delicate balance between personal discipline and national demand pervaded her work. Only after years of music, collision, loss, and adjustment did a state form that was sufficient to maintain the news rhythm while everything else continued to wobble. Within this ostensibly stable situation, a new hole emerged that Savannah was unable to fill with either private discretion or professional discipline. There are currently no publicly publicized developments about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. No more statements from investigators, no solid leads that might move the investigation in a different direction, and no names have been made public. The extended quiet came into Savannah's life in a music manner very different from what she did every day. In journalism, information must be inserted into every void. The gap needs to stay this time, not because there aren't any queries, but rather because giving a quick response could ruin the search. Music, living with a question that has no answer, becomes the quietest pressure of all, and the only music item that cannot be brought to air for someone used to standing in front of the public to seek truth. Savannah Guthrie's legacy is determined by her ability to prevent the information structure from breaking down during the most tense times in society, not by startling incidents or questions that make interview subjects uncomfortable. She is a representative of a generation of anchors who are content to stay on the sidelines and make sure the story is told in the right order, rather than attempting to take center stage. Her presence is a counter-standard as television shifts more and more toward posture and feeling, discipline, self-control, and a refusal to give in to the pressure of viral music. Her impact goes beyond the early hours of the day. She shows young journalists that mainstream television still has a function in educating viewers about the law, its ramifications, and its boundaries for media organizations. Without music trading standards for immediate approval, she demonstrates that an anchor may survive for a long time. The lack of compelled retractions or disciplinary punishment, even during her most scrutinized years, constituted a professional statement in and of itself. The cost of endurance is a more significant question raised by Savannah Guthrie's music tale on a deeper level. A personal tragedy may compel someone to accept gaps that will never be filled after dedicating their career to seeking the truth for the public. Her legacy consequently consists not only of broadcasts that have already been aired, but also of the way she continues to stand between private suffering and public pressure. Music, not by pleading for compassion, but rather by maintaining a disciplined silence that is becoming more and more uncommon in contemporary media life. Savannah Guthrie's ability to remain composed in a field that consistently rewards extremes is what distinguishes her music from other artists, not the fact that she performs in front of millions of people every morning. Despite being aware of the weight of power, she does not allow it to skew her music inquiries. She participates in conflict but stays out of it. She maintains a straight line despite standing in the midst of public opinion storms. Music between personal tragedy and national pressure. Not yelling, not running away, not compromising music in order to get acceptance more quickly. Savannah Guthrie is remembered now as more than just a contemporary anchor, more than tense political mornings or interviews that made music power wary. They bring to mind an uncommon current television model, a journalist who prioritized music discipline over impetuous passion, credibility over consensus, and acceptance of outstanding questions that the profession is unable to address. That is more resilient than any title, quiet and hard to quantify.